found it?
Yeah. You can tell to take a practice test tomorrow, I guess.
Oh, hi, Margot. Glad you're here. We're going to finish the geometry today. Uh, so you need your triangles packet and the second grammar packet. And also tomorrow, whenever you can, we took test 7 on page 692, and you could mail it to us. We're like 2 weeks from the SAT. So we're going to wait just a minute more to see if anybody else comes. I'm glad you're here. And so you saw the circle lesson? Were you able to see the circle lesson, Margot? Yeah, great, sweetheart. So we're finishing the geometry with this. We'll just start, and if somebody else comes, that would be great. I know a couple people are going to be watching this after. So if you would go to a formula page, and I'm just on 468, it doesn't matter. And you will see we conquered circles, but today we're conquering everything else. So we're going to cover the triangles and almost solid geometry. Also at the bottom of they tell you that the number of degrees in a triangle is 180. Okay, so that's good. So on the first page, of the packet, the interior angles of a triangle always add up to 180. So that's pretty easy. So on this one, we know every straight line is 180. So this is 100. And so x would be 50. And there's a theorem. Okay, that's okay, sweetheart. We'll just keep on going, for you later. Hopefully somebody else will come on. So this is 50. We can get through a lot of this before 3. I know I have to do the whole thing because other people are going to come on board later. Everybody's busy today. Okay, so I want to do a couple book problems that relate to the triangle being 180. So if you would go to page 600, we're going to do easy ones and hard ones. 600, number 5. It's hard to believe the test is just a couple weeks. No way. So on page 600, I'll let you try it and put an answer in the chat room. Your job is to get X. And we're using alternate interior angles, of course. So if you get an answer, just put it in the chat room. Yes. So this would be 20. For the people that are watching later, this is 20. That's 80. And so X has to be 100, which is B. Okay, we're going to go to a harder one. On 996, we're going to do number 20, the hardest one. Go from easy to hard. And you see if you can come up with a number. We're trying to find X. We just had to come up with an integer. And even if nobody comes on, we'll finish the lesson so you can watch the rest later. 2. So if we sort of domino out, this would be 74. These two would be 97. So this one would be 83. And our answer would be 97. And there's a theorem that the exterior angle of a triangle equals the two remote interior angles, but I'm not so worried about that right now. Just, do you see that it's 97? Just put C20 in the chat room. You were probably on your way. Oh, good. One more. So we're going to 352, number 32. Oh, this one's piece of cake. So this one will just be A is 34. What's B plus C? And so that'll just be 146. Thank you, College Board, for 10 points. Okay, so let's keep going on in the packet. So sometimes they nest the triangles. So here, if this is 40 and this is 120, that's 160. So this triangle down here has to be 20. So you always can't see where you're going. You just want to keep dominoing up. So then this is 30, 70, 40. So that's 140, and you're left with 40 degrees. Okay, this is a harder one because they don't give us any numbers. So we know these have to be equal, these arrows. So basically we could pick a number. Let's say y is 100. So if y is 100, this could be 80. These two guys would have to be 50 and 50. Same thing here. So you can't maybe always see the way to the answer, but you just keep progressing. It's probably been a year or two since you've had geometry. So then the arrows, all four of the arrows, and for people that are watching later, Sophia and Haley and Brooke, when we add these up, that would be 200, which equals 2 y's, because y was 100. And again, that exterior angle equals 2 remote interior comes into play. So now we have this one where the exterior angles of a triangle or any polygon always add up to 360. So if we look at this one, if z is 40, then this exterior angle has to be 140. And then so we just subtract that from 360, and x plus y have to equal 220. Thank you, College Board, for 10 points. There's only one trig identity we have to go over, and Sohcahtoa. So I'll do that even if you have to leave for work, I understand. So here, again, we have 360. So y plus c, we're going to subtract the 125. And so that'll be 235 for y plus c. Okay, one thing they like on the test in the harder one, and I expect you'll get some easy triangles and then some harder ones. This hexagon is going to equal 6 equilateral triangles, and so that's why they like it so much. But we could do the whole thing is 360 divided by 6 exterior angles, and so x would be 60. We don't have to do this page, so you girls that are watching later, as well as Marco, this isn't on the test anymore. Neither is the triangle inequality theorem. They took it off. So we're going to go right down to 3 types of triangles in the interest of time. Okay, so we have equilateral, isosceles, and right triangles. Equilateral, all the angles are 60, and isosceles, the two sides are equal, and then the opposite angles are equal. So I want to take a little segue onto some isosceles triangles in the book. And so 592, number 4. So if we go there, because I just want to see you apply it. Oh, this is a hard one. They call it a 4, but I think it's much harder than that. So we'll do this one together. My triangle isn't so great. Okay, so we know this is 31. Let's see if I can straighten this crazy thing. It's just hard to write on this vertical surface. Not used to it, so okay. And so they tell us this is 114 and RT equals TU. Not in my picture, but in reality. So one thing we know, if this is 114 and these are isosceles, then we know these two angles are equal and they have to split 66. So each of these has to be 33 degrees. What else can I figure out? Because my goal is to get X. And X is right here. Well, I just keep dominoing out. So if this is 114, this guy has to be 66. These two added together are 97, so this angle has to be 83. His vertical buddy has to be 83. Now I'm pretty much home because I have 83, 33, and I don't know, but I can get it. So 180 minus 116, and that will be 64, answer choice C. So that was a good one to practice multi-step. So if you see 4, just put that in the chat room. And you can do the circle. Margot, can you do number 9 on 693 like you went through that part? Because you'll probably get one of those. Can you also tell me you see number 9? We did it in the circle lesson, but I just want to be sure because I know what kind of score you're aspiring to, and I want to be sure you have knowledge of the circle on the coordinate plane from the circle lesson. So all I need is C4. Can you also tell me you see number 9 on the next page? Because I want you to be ready for a circle on the coordinate plane. Okay, great. Sorry, we're going to do one more. Again, I'm trying to get as much in before you have to go to work, so you keep an eye on the time. Okay, we're going to go to 731, number 17. That's a 7, sorry. Okay, so we can keep the momentum going. We'll go a little faster here. So we have MQ and NR intersect at point P. NP equals QP And also we know that MP equals PR. Our mission is to find QMR, this angle. So not so bad. So we have this is 70. This one's 60. So pretty easy to figure out that the vertical buddy has to be 60. That means this is a straight line, so this is 120. And these two are going to split the 60 because the opposite angles are equal. And so I would just grid in 30. So if you see 17, just let me know. Great. Okay, so the good thing is no proofs. The only trig you need to know is Sohcahtoa, obviously. And then one trig identity, which I'll give you, which you can watch later. So here we have, this is a hard one. We're number 18 in the no calculator on page 1120. Sorry if I didn't say that. And so this is Y, this is Z, and my mission is to find this X. Okay, so not so bad, because I have a little algebra they're giving me to do. So 180 minus Z is 2Y. Okay, so minus Z, and then they tell us Y is 75. So minus Z equals a minus 30. Okay, so not so bad. So Z is 30. These two have to equally split 150, so they each have to be 75. And then the number we need has to be 105. I better do it in black. So if you see 18, just let me know that. Oh, thanks. Okay, back to the packet. So we have isosceles, and then we have right triangles, where the Pythagorean Theorem, we have to use that. So this is pretty easy. This would be an equilateral triangle, and this is for the girls that are watching this later too. So XY has to be 6. This obviously would be 60. Then this one is isosceles. It might look like it's a right triangle, but you can't assume a right triangle unless they show you this sign, or they say it's a square. So if this is opposite the 50 and this is opposite the 50, this would be 4. And this is scaling, but we don't have to worry about that. And if we had to do it, you see the triangle's not drawn to scale, so that this one would be 35, and even though it doesn't look like it, because you might say, what would you smoke, Mrs. Hesser, but this would not actually be a 105-degree angle. But we go by what the figures are, so the shortest side would be AD, the next side up would be BD, and then the shortest side, even though it doesn't look like it, would be AD. Okay, so now we're dealing with perimeter. Pretty easy. It's just 1/2 the base times the height. So this one, for everyone watching later, is just going to be 1/2 times 8 times 6, or 24 square units. 1/2 of 40, which is 20 square units. Sometimes on a triangle, the altitude is outside if it's an obtuse triangle. So this would be 1/2 times 2 times 3, or 3. Now this one's harder, and I picked the 60, 60, 60 because I like that. So what we have to do, we're just putting our big toe in the water to get used to these triangles. So if I draw a perpendicular line, then I will be creating 2 30, 60, 90 triangles. And they have that in the formula page, and so we're going to go over that in a second. So if this is 8, the side opposite the right triangle, that's our 2x. This opposite the 30 would just be 4. And this would be 4 square root of 3, because it's opposite the 60. Now, not to worry, we're going to go into depth in these. So that will be 1/2 times the whole base times the height, which would be 16 square root of 3. And we're going to go into this in depth just in a second, Margot. But first we have to do our couple things. So remember I said they like hexagons, so that's why I'm exposing these to you. So the formula for calculating the sum of the interior angle of a polygon is n minus 2. So here we have 6 sides. So it would be 720. So we know from what we did before that this would, every angle, this would be 120. And so x would be 60. We could also consider this a Ferris wheel, 360 divided by 6. So each of these is 60. And so we would pick 60 for our answer. Okay, so that's not so bad. Now, similar triangles are all over the test. And what they are, you'll probably get one of these. They're not congruent, so they're not the same size, but they're the same shape. And the sides are in ratio to each other. So we would have 3:9 is 5:15, as 6:18. And so we would just add these up and get 42. Now I want to try some in the book because these are popular questions. Okay, so I want to go to 863. This one was a little hard because it's number 18. So I just want to decode a couple of similar triangles. This is a hard one. Okay, so BD is parallel to AE, and we're trying to get the length of CE. Well, we know by angle, 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 these are both right, that these are similar triangles. We're given that this is 6 and this is 8. Now, those are multiples of 3, 4, 5, which we're going to go over in a second. But you could always use the Pythagorean Theorem. You could always punt and use that. So that'll be 100 is C squared. So C is 100. C squared is 100, so C is 10. Sorry, I misspoke. And that makes sense that we would have a 6, 8, 10 triangle, because that's 3 times 2, 4 times 2, and 5 times 2 for your girls watching later. So now we have to see the ratio. If this is 6 and this is 18, do you see we're multiplying by 3 each time? So we don't need it, but our base is going to be 8 times 3, or 80, 24. And then the big one we need is 10 times 3, and I would grid in 30. So that would be my answer. If you see 18, Margot, if you'd let me know. Again, it's another C18, sorry. And if you have a question, just put it in the chat room. Oh, thanks. We're going to do another one on this same test. So like I said, you won't get 30% geometry problems like there were before, but they'll be peppered through the test, and we want them to be surefire points. So 873, number 16. So we have two triangles, and they're both right, and this one's 32, so this has to be 58. So this is 58, and this is 32. So we know they have the same shape, but not the same size. We're trying to get BC over AB. What's the analogous one here? And so this is DEF. So they flip the triangle on us, and we have to be ready for that contingency. So AB is the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse here would be DE. And now that's on the bottom. Sorry, I almost fell into their trap. And then BC is the small leg that starts at 58, so that'll be analogous to DF. So they made it a little harder by twisting the triangle. If you see 16, Margot, just let me know. And if not, just put a question mark. Oh, great. I probably knew you were going to do that. We're going to try one more for a certain reason. We're on 336. And we're going to look at number 12. So I have a triangle and a bigger one. But they're similar. And this is ABC. and this is DEF. And we know this is 12 and 13 and 5. So this also has to be in the same ratio, maybe probably different numbers, but the same ratio. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 10, 24, 26, I don't know. But we need the cosine of E. Well, the cosine of E would be the same as the cosine of B. And so the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent to B is 12 over 13. That'll be the same thing here. And so that would be answer choice B. Okay, so if you see 12, just let me know that. Okay, great. And you keep a watch on the time, Margot. I'm watching the chat room. So when you leave, I'll keep doing this and you can watch it later. And I know the other girls are going to be watching it later too. Everybody was busy today looking at colleges. So the next page is our page on the Pythagorean Theorem. And so in any right triangle, that can apply. So for this one, we need to draw a line, and then we can figure out this hypotenuse, which will equal this one. So if we go from this side, it'll be 6 squared. So that would just be 100. So C would be 10. And then if we go the other way, so that'll be 100 minus 81. So x squared is 19. So x would be the square root of 19. And if you have any questions, I'm watching the chat room. We just want everybody to have a working knowledge of the Pythagorean Theorem. This is a pretty hard one, so we'll do it together. So we have a ladder. We have to do the Pythagorean Theorem twice. And I have a height. The ladder is 50 feet. The bottom of the ladder is 14 feet. And we have a guy climbing up the ladder. It doesn't say that, but so then the ladder is going to slip down. So whatever H was before, it's going to go down 8 feet. The guy's going to go, he's not going to get hurt. He's going to go sort of flying off the ladder. And we want to know if it juts out, how much more what is this going to be? So it's just using the Pythagorean Theorem twice, bringing geometry back up. So this would just be h squared plus 14 squared is 2,500. So this would be 196. And so the square root of 2304 would just be 48. Then the height is going to go down 8 feet. So it's going to go down to 40. See if I can make this red. So this is 40. Our ladder is still 50. So again, I would use the Pythagorean Theorem, but knowing about 3, 4, 5 triangles, which they like to do on the test, this would just be 30, the base, and so it would fall out 16 feet. Okay, if that makes sense, Margot, can you just tell me C2? And you girls later, I'm sorry I won't be able to explain it better than this, but you can always pause it, slow down. I just want you to have a working knowledge of the Pythagorean Theorem, which you probably had a couple years ago from what I've seen. So we just need a C2 with this. I did go through it pretty quickly. Oh, she sees it. Okay, good. So now we're getting into our special right triangles that they put in the formula page, and so you have to know them. So they don't give you this, but we've already sort of done it. 3, 4, 5 could be 6, 8, 10, or 9, 12, 15. 5, 12, 13, just because the numbers work out so pretty, could be 10, 24, 26, and so forth. Now, these are the ones they give you. The first one is an isosceles right triangle. So if these angles are 45 and 45, this would be x, and opposite the right angle would be x square root of 2. The other one, now you can always go refer to the formula page, but I sort of would like you to have, so opposite the right angle would be our 2x, this would be our x, and this would be our x square root of 3. So on the next page, I'll give you a second. Can you put these expressions where they should be on the triangle? And I have to look because, okay, so this is 30. And I just sort of want to embed it in your brain. Obviously, you can refer to it. So if that is sort of good for you, let's try the chart. So if our little leg is x, the long leg would just be 2 square roots of 3, and the hypotenuse would just be 4. If they give us the hypotenuse, that's our 2x, then x would just be 3. This would be 3 square root of 3. If they gave us 4 square roots of 3, the short leg would be 4, and the hypotenuse would be 8. This is the hard one because I had to multiply by the square root of 3 to go this way, so I have to divide by the square root of 3 going this way, and we have to rationalize it. So this would just be the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3, and this would be 2 square root of 3. And like I said, you will have the formula page on test day, but we're trying to give it to you to make it, a review from months ago when you had this. And so when we have an isosceles right triangle, it's pretty easy. These guys are equal, and this would be x square root of 3. So, let's try a book one. So we're going to 1006. Okay, I'm going to have you try this one, Margot. I know you have to leave soon. And we're supposed to get length AD. And so this is where just being familiar with the triangle, you can always go back to the formula page. This is a number 19, which is a little difficult. Just put the answer in the chat room if you figure it out. And the three of you other girls who are watching this later, you can try to figure it out. No, it's not 6 squared root of 3 because it's opposite the 30-degree angle, so it would be 6. It's just going to be our x. This one would be 6 squared root of 3. Does that make sense that it is B? Okay, great. Okay, and I'm just watching to see when you leave, but we're going to keep on mustering on here because 3 other girls are going to be watching this later too. Okay, so we're back in the packet, and we're going to try a few of these and then try some in the book, just to give you a familiarity. So here we have the roof of a house. So it's not like we would usually see the triangle. So this is isosceles x, x. This has to be 7 square roots of 2. We want the area of the square, which would be 7 square root of 2 times 7 square root of 2, which will be 49 times 2, which would be 98. Okay, so this one, we've already done a lot of this packet. Okay, so we have 9 and 15, and this would be 16. So we have to get the height, so we can sort of see it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. We're multiplying everything by 3. 3 times 3, so this would be 12. Then it's another 3, 4, 5 triangle. So this would be 4 times 3, 4 times 4, and this would be 4 times 5, which would be 20. Okay, Margot, just mark where you are leaving off. Have a great day, sweetheart. Okay, we're going to just keep on for Brooke and Haley, who's at Slippery Rock, and Sophia. So for this one, we're trying to find the length of QR. We actually put this in the packet, and then it came to be on the test. So what we have to do is draw a line. They don't say draw a line. But if we draw the perpendicular bisector, then this would be 60. We know that this is 105, this apex angle. So this would be 45, and this would be 45. So 8 is my 2x. So opposite the 30 would just be x, which would be 4. And so then we would have 4, 4, and this would be 4 square root of 2. Okay. Now, we're going to go through, what I'd like you to do now if you're watching this later, is pause it and then let's do one book problem. It's pretty hard before we dive into these. So I'd like to go to page 350. Number 30. So this is a hard one. It's definitely end zone. So all these are 90. It's a square. And we know this is hard. So we know that this is 90. We're trying to get this whole big angle here. So let's see what we can do. CD is 1/2 of AB. So if this length is 1/2 of AB, which is this length, and I know this is 90, and so that if this is 1/2, this has to be 1/2, this has to be our 2x. That's the hard part to see. So if this is our 2x, this is our 30, so this has to be our 60, because this will just be our x. And then 60 plus 90 for this really hard one, it's 150 degrees. Okay, so now that was a very hard one, but I want to try to stretch you. So we're going to go back and pause this for a little bit and try 5 of these. And then after you've tried 5, you can come on board and watch me do them. So here we're getting the average, and we're going to be doing our statistics lesson right before the SAT that Tuesday night. So if we're adding A, B, C plus D plus E all over, we have 5 angles. So we know A plus B have to equal 90. C, D, and E have to equal 180. So that's going to be 270 divided by 5. And so that will be 54 degrees for each of those. We're just taking you on a Peloton triangle lesson. Here, we have to get the area of the whole square. Well, we know that buried in a square is isosceles triangles. So we could do x, so we could do x squared plus x squared is 6 squared. So that'll be 2x squared is 36. And so x squared is our answer, which is 18. Okay, here, again, I'm trying to just stretch you for any kind of thing you might get. We're cutting the triangle out. So if this little part is 5 and this part is 9, this little part has to be 4, because 5 plus 4 is 9. This little line segment has to be 3, because 5 plus 3 has to be 8. So this will be a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Then we have to get the perimeter. So going along the dark line, we would have 3 5s plus 17. Sorry, which would give us 32. Now this one is pretty hard. It's an end zone problem. So we have a square. I'm not going to worry so much about this side. Let's focus. The area, okay, line segment DE is 8 square root of 3. Okay. So this is 30. They tell us this. So this is my 2x. So this would be 60. And so opposite the 30 would just be 4 square roots of 3, if that makes sense, because this is just our x. Then opposite the 60, and this is why it's tricky, would be 4 square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Because remember, opposite 60 is x square root of 3. That would just give us 4 times the square root of 9, and 4 times 3 would be 12. Okay, I wanted to do one like this because it's a pretty popular problem. We can sort of see what we're going to have to do here. We're going to have to get the area of the triangle and then subtract 1/6 of the circle. That's why I didn't know whether to do the circle or the triangle, because we're trying to get this shaded area. So, the area of the triangle, we have to get it first. Okay, in the figure above, the center of the circle is O, so we know our radius is 6. And so, if that's 6, and we have a 90-degree triangle, that'll be my x. So I don't need it, but this part would be 12. This part would be 6 square root of 3. They tell us this is 60 degrees, so we know that. So we're going to have the area of the triangle as 1/2 times the base times the height, which is 18 square root of 3. And then we're taking just 1/6 of the circle. We have the radius. Mostly I just wanted to do this for the conception. So we have 1/6 of 36. We're subtracting 6 pi. So that would be C. Okay, on to another one. And like I said, I just wanted you to try 5 of these. So we have a trapezoid. So if this is 10, this would be 10. And this is 4. And this is 4. So we know the whole perimeter is 38. So if we subtract this 28, we have 10 that has to go here and here. And so when we divide that up, that makes sense that that's 5. And this is 5. And then we have a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Our job now is to get the perimeter of the rectangle. Would just be 10 plus 10 plus 6, which would be 26. Not so bad. This one, if you get one like this, okay, we know Z, we don't know Z, that's what we're trying to find, but we know Y is 20, and these X's are 30. This is sort of a part of that nested triangle we had before, so we're going to draw the whole triangle like we had in the beginning of the class. So this angle and this angle, we have 20 plus these two, which have to equal 180. I'll call this B. So if this is 30 and 30 and 20, that's 80. So each of these has to be 50. And now all I'm looking at is this triangle that has the Z. I'm just going to pull it out here. So that's 50 and 50. And so Z would be 80. Thank you, College Board, for 10 points. It doesn't look like it's 80, but it is. Okay, this one I'm going to enlarge. This is their fave for the very end of the test. It starts out not so bad. In the figure above, A, B, C, D, E, F is a regular hexagon. That means that all these sides are equal and they're all 2. I'm trying to get the area of A, C, D, F. Okay. So what I have to do, and they don't tell me this, is I have to draw a perpendicular line here. Remember we learned that B is going to be 120. So these will each be 60. I'm trying to go slow for you girls. So I will have a 30, 60, 90 triangle right here. My whole goal is I just need to get CA. I need to get a length because I have a width. So, if opposite the 30 would be 1, opposite the 60 would be square root of 3, and this top part would be the square root of 3. So I add those together, so CA is 2 square roots of 3. Then I'm just doing length times width. Length times width would be 2 square root of 3 times the square root of 3 2 square root of 3. This would be 2 square roots of 3, and the base is 2. I'm sorry. So that answer would be 4 square root of 3. And that's a hard one. And I'm just trying to equip you that you draw lines on the harder ones. Okay, we just have 2 more of these for our little triangle workout, and then we get into trig. So here, I have to get the shaded region. Well, let's label everything. So the height is 12. AC is 10 for this whole long thing. So I know that these two equal each other. I know that AD is 2. So that means that DE has to be 3, 3, and 2. So the whole thing is 10. So I can just do this triangle. Remember we said that the altitude can be outside the triangle. So we would just have 1/2 times 2 times 12. And that would just give us 12 for one triangle, 12 for the other one, and the total would be 24. Could I take the whole big triangle, 1/2 times 10 times 12? which is going to be 60 minus the inner triangle, 1/2 of 72, which would be 36, and I would still get the 24. Thank you, College Board, for 10 points. Right now, in the interest of time, we're not going to do this one because I haven't seen one this hard on the test. So now we're going into trig. Okay, so this is one basic thing you have to know, and then one identity. So Sohcahtoa, you have to know on the test. You don't have to know cosecant, secant, or cotangent. We were over preparing you. So you have to know tangent, but you won't have to know cotangent. So on the next page, take a second. Since you don't have to know these, I just want you to find the sine, the cosine, and the tangent of this triangle right up here. Remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, which is always opposite the right angle. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent is obviously opposite over adjacent. So just fill this in. I want you to think through it. And then we're going to get to that one key identity that's on every test. Okay, so your sine of theta should be 5 over 12. I'm sorry, 5 over 13. The cosine should be adjacent over hypotenuse, and then the tangent is obviously opposite, which is 5 over 12. So that's not so bad. So Sohcahtoa should be in your toolbox for the test. Okay, let's look at this one, and this is going to bring us to our identity we have to know. That really gives you an edge on the test. So we're trying to get the cosine of 23. So let's think about this. Cosine is going to be adjacent over the hypotenuse. So the cosine of 23 would just be AB over the hypotenuse, which is AC. And now this is the identity we're trying to drill into your brain. The sine of 67 is the same thing. So this is this. And so our identity we want to know, and you could probably write this down in your book because I want to do a bunch of problems, is the sine of theta. It actually equals the cosine of 90 minus theta. Or I could say it the other way. I could say the cosine of theta equals the sine of 90 minus theta, and we just proved it. But now I'd like to do some book problems. So our first one I'd like to do is on, and I want to show you where this just gives you an edge, having this knowledge. 613, number 36. And this is worth mastering now. All we have to do after this is solve geometry. So on 613, oh, this is a hard one. Why did I pick the hard one first? I'm not sure. Okay, this is 12, and we have RS, and this is 5. And so this is a right angle, so we do have a right triangle. So it says in the triangle RST above, point W not shown, so I'm just going to put it here, lies on RT. So what is the value of the cosine of RSW? I'll call this theta. Minus the sine of WST, which is this one. And so remember, we said that these are going to be equal, so if I subtract them, I would just grid in a 0. And this one is a little hard because you had to draw the line and realize that these are related. I want to try an easier one. Let's go to 1234, number 19. Okay, so our test is just 2 weeks away for you girls that are away watching this later. So on 1234, we're looking at number 19. And this is why it's so good to know. In a right triangle, one angle is x. And so the sine of x is 4/5. So that would just be, if we bothered to write it out, it'd be a 3/4/5. We want the cosine of this one, which will also just be 4/5. So we could work it out or just know that those two guys are equal. And we answered a very hard question in 5 seconds. Let's go to 265. So in their teaching section, we're going to look at number 8. So this is something they do expect you to know. And like I said, our job is to just show you what you have to know. So you don't have to go through a whole page geometry book. Okay. Before we do 265, sorry, we'll get to that one. We're going to look at one prior to that. That might be a little bit easier to see. And most of the stuff we've done. Okay, so let's look at 265, number 8. So we want the sine of pi/5. We want to find what is that equal to? Well, we already know it's going to equal the cosine of 90 minus whatever this is. So 90 degrees is just pi over 2 from our circle. So we'll just have pi over 2. We have to get a common denominator, which would be 10. So that'll be 5 pi over 10 minus, here we have to multiply by 2. And so our answer for this pretty hard one would be 3 pi. Okay, not so bad. So back to the packet. Just know this one identity, the sine of whatever theta is going to be the cosine of 90 of the other acute angle, which makes total sense when you go through it. So we only have one more in the packet. So we have a right triangle measuring sides. 12, 35, and the big one is 37. So we know that has to be the hypotenuse. So we're trying to get the cosine of the angle opposite the 35 side. So we want the cosine here. Let me darken that. So the cosine of this angle, we'll call it theta, would be adjacent, which is going to be 12, over the hypotenuse, which is 37. And so that's going to be answer choice D. Okay, so now, on a happier note, we're not going to do the boat because they don't give you any inverse trig on the test. And we're not going to do the plane. Actually, we're going to just go all the way to solid. You don't have to know any inverse trig. We thought at first you would, but you don't have to know that. So we're just going to skip all this and go all the way to the solid geometry, which is here. Okay, there's just a few geometric concepts tested on the test, and they give you the formulas for cube, rectangle, rectangular, solid, and cone, and sphere and cylinder. They give you the volumes, but on the SAT, they do not give you the surface area. So we wanted to try one of these. So if you get a surface area question, you're thinking of 2 dimensions like you would wrap a package. So let's try this first one. So obviously a cube has 6 faces. So this would be 6s squared is 54. So s squared is 9. So each side of the cube would be 3. And if we had to get the volume, that would just be 3 times 3 times 3, which would be 27 cubic units. Okay, let's try a harder one with a cylinder. So we have, let's say, a soup can, and we're going to take the label of the can off. A square label was, my label isn't square, but let's say it is square. It's wrapped around a can and a cylinder and meets with no overlap. And so my mission is to try to get the area of the base of the can. Well, this is the hard connection. Do you see that the base of the can will be the circumference, the base of the label will be the circumference of the can. That's the hard part. So we would have 8 equals 2 pi r. Remember, we always have to get the radius. So we divide by 2 pi. That would give us, one radius is going to be 4 over pi. So then we're just going to do pi r squared, which we did last time for our circles. That'll give us 16 over pi, which will be answer choice D. Another one they could do, it's pretty easy actually, is they could ask you to stack things in a box. So we have an ice compartment of a refrigerator that's 8 by 4 by 3. We're putting in little ice cubes that are 2 by 2 by 2. So we're just going to take the big refrigerator, the volume, length times width times height, and we're dividing that by each little cube is 2 times 2 times 2, or 8. Oh, it's 6 inches tall. I didn't write that in there. Sorry. And so we would fit in 24 ice cubes. And they're not going to make it, they're going to make like CDs in a box or something like that. So that's 24. We don't have to know this anymore. They used to put this on the test, but we don't have to know it. So we're going right to the next page. So what I'd like to do is focus first on number 5. We really thought they were going crazy, which they didn't do, so we don't have to do that one. Okay, so let's look at this one, because I put this in the packet and then amazingly it was on the test. So do you see we have a cylinder and 2 cones. Okay, so let's figure what that's going to be, because they give us the formula for both. So the cylinder formula is pi r squared h, and then we're going to add that to a cone. We have 2 of those, so that'll be 1/3 pi r squared h times 2, so that'll be 2/3 pi r squared h. So the cylinder plus 2 cones is going to equal, they tell us the volume is 90 pi. Okay, let's just divide all the pi's out of there. So, because our job is to get the radius. Okay, so we know our heights are 18. So we have 18 r squared plus 2/3, because we have 2 cones, r squared times the height, which is 18, equals 90. Okay, so 3 goes into 18 6 times. So we'll get 18 r squared plus 12 r squared is equal to 90. So 30 r squared is 90. We now just divide both sides by 30. And so r squared will be 3. And so r will be the square root of 3, which is answer choice A. So remember I said I put this in the packet and then it appeared on the test. So I'd like you to go to one last book problem. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to go to page 1131. I wasn't lying. I put it in the packet. Hey, Jim. Almost one problem. So this is a pretty good workout for the solid geometry. So we're going to 1131. So nobody's here, but you'll just be
Yeah, I can
run through it. Do you see we have a silo? So it's the same thing as mine, sort of. Only here we have 5 and 5 feet. And so I'd like you to try this one, and then I'll wait a couple seconds, and then you can do the you can check your answer. So again, we're just doing the same thing. We're doing a cylinder. And you can definitely use a calculator in this one. 2 cones. Just getting you familiar with this in case for test days. So the base would be 25 times 5. Oh, times 10 for the cylinder, which is 250 times pi. And this is a case where you're going to have to multiply by 3.14 plus 2/3 pi. For the cones, we're doing 25 times 5 for the height, which will be 125. And so when you put this all in the calculator, you're going to get answer choice D, which is 1047.2. Okay, so now Jim's going to take you through grammar 2. I got it.
Okay.
Hello. Yes.
Alright, so we're gonna do the second grammar lesson. It looks like this. I'll bring it up on the screen so you can find your packet. Alright, this is our second grammar lesson. Today we're going to go over pronouns and antecedents, restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. Mainly we're just going to go over pronouns. We actually moved commonly confused words to another grammar lesson. So today will be very pronoun heavy. And pronouns are just used to take the place of other nouns. So in English, I can use a pronoun he to refer to Bob. He is Bob. So Bob is the antecedent. That's just the thing that that to which the pronoun refers. So he's the antecedent. Bob is, and the pronoun he can refer back to Bob. So in a sentence, every sentence that contains a pronoun, we always must have an antecedent. We always must be able to figure out who or what the pronoun refers to. And here's a rule. In any sentence, a pronoun must agree with its antecedent in person, gender, and number. So, for example, this would be incorrect. And obviously they're going to make it harder on the SAT, but this is the general idea. They are Bob will be incorrect because how can a plural pronoun refer to something that is singular? That's the general idea. Of course, they'll make it trickier on the SAT, but something plural can never refer back to something that's singular. We have a problem, and that's the general idea here. I'm simplifying it, of course. But all they do is change the pronoun, and they're hoping that you won't pay attention, or that you'll miss it, that you're not paying attention. So the antecedent, the pronoun just refers back to the antecedent. So here's an example sentence. So we could say the candidates, that would be our antecedent, have said they support the proposed legislation. So I can use a plural pronoun they to refer back to many candidates who are also plural, and everything works. That makes sense. But here we have a few pronouns that have some issues. One thing I did want to mention is this. I didn't mention it yet. If the gender is unknown, if the gender of the individual is unknown, we prefer to use he or she to refer to the individual, at least for the past 100 years. Just because it's nice not to assume someone is masculine, which is what they used to do. They just used to assume anyone worth talking about was generally masculine unless proven otherwise. But nowadays we prefer to use both pronouns if we don't know the gender of the individual. So let's look at a few examples here. So the first one says the typical teenager is involved in many activities outside of their school. So the typical teenager would be singular. We only have one of them. How can I use a plural pronoun, T-H-E-I-R? This is plural. How can something plural refer back to something that is singular? It can't. That's the issue that we have here. So we can't use a plural pronoun to refer to something that is singular. Do we know the gender of the typical teenager? Nope. So we should use both. The typical teenager is involved in many activities outside of his or her school. Since we don't know the gender of the typical teenager, use both. And these are singular pronouns, so we can use singular pronouns to refer back to something that is singular. And that makes sense. Next one. It is a sign that an infant is ready for solid food when it loses the tongue thrust reflex. So here we know we're talking about an infant, and an infant, of course, would be singular. But can an infant be an it? That's the question. Can I use a singular pronoun we reserve for things? Can I use a pronoun reserved for things to refer back to a human being? Of course not. So we need to use a pronoun that is acceptable for human beings. It is a sign that an infant is ready for solid food when, not it, when he or she. We don't know the gender of the infant, so we have to use both. It is a sign that an infant is ready for solid food when he or she loses the tongue thrust reflex. So make sure that your pronouns agree with your antecedents. Watch out for pronoun shift. This is an error that occurs in English. Pronouns can't magically shift in person, gender, or number mid-sentence. We would have a problem. So for example, you can't switch from a third person one to a second person you. It just doesn't work. So let's see an example of that in action. So, one cannot play well if you don't practice. Doesn't make sense. Just maintain one or the other. We can maintain third person if we like for the entire sentence. We could say one one cannot play well if one doesn't practice. That would work. Or if we wanted to do it the other way, we could maintain second person and we could say, you won't play well if you don't practice. So however you want to do it, just maintain person, just as you would want to maintain gender or number. It'd be weird if suddenly in your sentence, something that's supposed to be singular suddenly becomes plural later on in the sentence. So that can't happen. It's illegal in English. And there are 3 pronoun cases in English. So we have the subjective case. This means the pronoun is the doer of the action. We have the objective case, which means the pronoun acts as an object, either an indirect or a direct object. And we also have the possessive case. This means the pronoun has some kind of ownership. These are the 3 cases we can have. So let's see it in action. Let's take a look at I. So if I am doing the action, I drove the car. So I would be doing the action. I am the subject of that sentence. I am driving the car, or I drove the car. I would be doing that action. And so everything seems to be fine there. But what happens if he gave something to me? I becomes me if I'm receiving something indirectly from someone else. I would be the indirect object of that sentence. I becomes me. Jake gave me the ball. It is now mine. So it is now my possession. I can now refer to it as mine. That's the possessive case. So pretty simple. Just be aware that if you're doing the action, you would use the I form. So you would never say, for example, me like swimming. Makes no sense. I would be doing the action in that sentence. So I would be in the subjective case. You would just say, I enjoy swimming. But if someone is giving something to me, I would be receiving it, and I becomes me. Another important one, well, we should probably go through a few of these. I definitely want to go through they. So they wrote the document. If they're doing the action, he gave it to them. If he gave them something, they would be an indirect object in that sentence. And now it is theirs, T-H-E-I-R. This means multiple people own the thing, whatever it is. So because this is plural, they're all plural. These are plural. So he gave it to them. It is now theirs. So multiple people own it. It's important to see that one because it's plural. But we also have another important one right here that I wanted to mention, who. So who is speaking to me? That would be a question. The who would be doing the action. To whom am I speaking? So if I would be doing the speaking, if I'm doing the action, who becomes whom? And if we're looking for the possessive, whose car is this? Whose phone is this? We could also ask that type of question. And whom becomes whose. So watch out for the cases. Just think about who's doing the action. Is this person doing the action? Well, then they're the subject. If not, who becomes whom? If they're an indirect object, if they're receiving something, or if they're a direct object. These pronouns, that, which, this, these, and those, they never change, so you don't have to worry about them. If a pronoun is the subject of a sentence, we use a subjective form. So here's an example. I enjoy a good movie. I am doing the enjoying. So we use that I form. We use the subjective form from the first column. Here is a pronoun as a direct object. So who is the subject of this sentence? Just quickly asking myself this. It's you. So you would be doing the mailing. You would be doing the action. And them, I'm assuming they're letters or packages. This would be your direct object. So it's directly receiving an action from you, the subject. But we also have indirect objects. So let's take a look at the indirect object. It's just a little bit different than a direct object. Here's another example. It's very similar to our last example. So you is still the subject of this sentence. Are you, the subject, mailing him the letters? So the letters are our direct object. They're directly receiving the action from you, the subject. And our indirect object would be this person, him. So this person would be receiving the letters. That's our indirect object, and the direct object would be the letters. So when in doubt, just find the subject, figure out who's doing the action. When in doubt, find the antecedent, and you should normally be okay with these pronouns. The next topic is something called the object of the preposition. And so we're introducing this idea of prepositions. I might have to talk about them a little bit. Well, what are they? They're just a fundamental part of speech, but you can kind of see what they are just based on the word itself. If you look at the prefix of the word preposition, and the prefix of the word preposition is this word pre. And pre means before. So that's a good clue about what prepositions do. They go in front of things to create prepositional phrases. That's the only thing they do in English. And as far as I'm concerned, there's only two things you need to remember about prepositions. In English, only two things you need to remember. The first thing is because they go in front of things, they say you should never end a sentence on a preposition because you're using it incorrectly. It's supposed to form a phrase. So I'm just going to give you an example of ending a sentence on a preposition. They say you're not supposed to do this. This is an error in English. Here's my sentence. I say something like this. Where is my money at? So at is a preposition. I'm just going to write my question here. Where is my money at? So this is an error in English. At is a preposition. And it does not belong in my sentence. It does not belong at the end of my sentence. Can't end a sentence on a preposition. I would just say, where is my money, right? I don't need a preposition at all. So the prepositions are these type of words: for, to, from, unto, before, after, with, against, on top of, below, at the surface, in between. There are over 100 prepositions that are commonly used in English, so I can't really give you a list of prepositions. They are a fundamental part of speech, just like a verb is a fundamental part of speech. So you have to be familiar with prepositions. Many of them involve places, placement, changes of state, liquids turn into gases. Into would be a preposition. So there are over 100 commonly used prepositions in English. So they say never end a sentence on a preposition. I'm going to give you another example of that so you can see that it's incorrect and it doesn't make sense. So here's another example. Who is there? Here's an incorrect example. I'm ending a sentence on a preposition. Who is there at? That's my question. It should sound crazy because it is crazy. It makes no sense because I'm ending this sentence on a preposition, which we're not supposed to do. The sole function of prepositions, we're supposed to add some words to them to make prepositional phrases. So let me do it. Who is there at the door? So I can take a preposition at. I can add a few words to it. At the door is now our prepositional phrase. So I just made a phrase using my preposition, which is perfectly legal to do in English, and I'm not ending my sentence on the preposition, so we have a good sentence here. Who is there at the door? Question mark would be a good question. So that's the first thing you need to remember about prepositions. They say never end a sentence on one because they're supposed to make prepositional phrases. You shouldn't be ending on the preposition at all. That's not their function in English. And the other thing they say about that you need to remember about prepositions is this: the object of the preposition. Well, what's this? Basically, if we look back at our handy-dandy chart showing us the cases, so we have pronouns as the subject, the doer of the action. We have pronouns in the objective case. They're receiving some kind of action indirectly or directly from a subject. All that happens, anything that's in the prepositional phrase, it moves from the subjective case into the objective case. That's what the object of the preposition is. Anything in your prepositional phrase. I becomes me, who becomes whom, we become us. Anything in your prepositional phrase should not be in this first box. Anything in your prepositional phrase must be one of these words. All I'm trying to say is that if you have pronouns in your sentence, they change into this objective case if they're in your prepositional phrase. So let's see it in action. Let's see the object of the preposition. You'll see what I mean here. So let's see it in action. For we parents, it can be hard to find the time to exercise. So for is a preposition. I can take some words and add it to my preposition and make a phrase, but it wouldn't be for we parents. This subjective form changes to this objective form. We becomes us just because it's in our prepositional phrase. It's the object of the preposition. So it wouldn't be for we parents. It can be hard to find the time to exercise. That's incorrect. The correct version would be this. For us parents, it can be hard to find the time to exercise because us is the objective form of we. It has to be in the objective form because of this objective case caused by the object of the preposition. So those are the only two things you need to remember about prepositions. They say never end a sentence on a preposition. Why? Because it's supposed to make a phrase. You shouldn't end on the preposition. The whole point of prepositions are to make prepositional phrases. That's their only function in English, so you certainly shouldn't end on one. That's the first rule. The second rule is this. We becomes us. Whatever's in this prepositional phrase is going to change from the subjective form to the objective form based on that chart. Next topic are reflexive and intensive pronouns. And these are those self and selves words. So here they all are. There's only a few of them. Myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, oneself, ourselves, themselves, and yourselves. So these words, these self and selves words, are used in two different ways. They're either used reflexively or they're used intensively. So there's two different usages here, but with the same words, just these words right here. So if we're using them reflexively, think reflection. This subject will also be an object in the sentence, typically. I'm going to underline that. Usually we use it reflexively when the subject is also performing an action on or for his or herself in the sentence. So let's take a look at that. The woman saw herself in the mirror. So here's a simple sentence in English. I know the woman is my subject. Try to write tiny. So I understand that she's the subject, she's the doer of the action, that makes sense. But she is also an object in our sentence. Because she's performing an action on herself, she's seeing herself in the mirror. She is both subject and object. So it's the reflexive usage here. The same thing is true for this man. The man is buying himself a sweater. So the man is our subject. I know he's the doer of the action, but he's also receiving a sweater. I know he is the indirect object in his own sentence, and the sweater would be the direct object that he is receiving from himself, if that makes sense. If you need to form a more complicated sentence, you might need to use a reflexive. The intensive usage is a little different than the reflexive usage. It's not a fundamentally important part of our sentence. It's really just there for emphasis. It's more similar to an exclamation point than anything else. It's not an object. It's not anything important. So let's take a look at an example of the intensive usage. I like to say that it's similar to an exclamation mark. It's only there for emphasis. It's only there to intensify something within the sentence. So let's take a look at this example. Here's our example sentence. It says, Christine made all of the birthday decorations herself. So here is one of those self or selves words, and really it's just here for emphasis. It's similar to an exclamation mark. If I crossed it off, the sentence would still make sense because it's only there for emphasis. It's not a fundamentally important part of our sentence. It's not an object. It's not receiving anything from Christine. I'm going to try to cross it off just to test if the sentence still makes sense. That's the test. So I'm going to temporarily cross this off. If this sentence still makes sense, then it was only there for emphasis. It was only there as an intensive pronoun. So Chris made all the birthday decorations, period, still makes sense. So I know this herself was just there for emphasis. The herself can almost be thought of as an exclamation mark, as something that's there to create the emphasis that we desire. Here's another example. She stayed up all night writing her paper, as I have done countless times myself. What if we cross off the myself? Would the sentence still make sense? Yes. She stayed up all night writing her paper, as I have done countless times. So because that sentence still makes sense, I know that this was just an intensive usage. This was just intensifying the reality of this paper writing in order to create an emphasis. All the author is just saying, well, I've done this myself. It's just there for emphasis. So those are the two ways these self or selves words are used correctly. They're either reflexives or they're intensives as they're used in English. And let's take our woman example from earlier. Let's try removing the herself. That's the test I earlier said. So does this still have meaning, or have we lost meaning? The woman saw in the mirror. So we have lost some meaning. So that was a fundamentally important part of our sentence. That was an object that we needed in our sentence. So because we have lost meaning, that was a reflexive use, not an intensive use. That's the test. And here's the other example that I know it's just there for emphasis. I removed it here, and the sentence still makes perfect sense. So I know that that was just there for emphasis. So now we're going to quickly just circle whether these 5 questions, or whether these 5 sentences here reflexively or intensively use these bolded pronouns. So I'm going to look at the first example. It says the gymnast picked herself up off the ground and tried again. Well, is this there for emphasis? Is this there as a reflexive part of our sentence, a fundamentally important part of our sentence? I'm going to temporarily remove it, and let's see if we've lost some meaning. I think we will lose some meaning. The gymnast picked up off the ground and tried again. I don't know what's happening in my sentence. I have lost meaning. So that must have been a reflexive usage. That means our gymnast is both subject and object. She's performing an action on herself or for herself. Let's look at the second one. We ourselves are to blame for exceeding the budget. Let's determine if this was here for emphasis or if this is a fundamentally important part of our sentence, an object maybe. I'm going to cross it out temporarily. We are to blame for exceeding the budget. I have lost no meaning. I think that was just there for emphasis, similar to an exclamation mark. That is an intensive usage of this pronoun. It's just there to emphasize something. It's not a fundamentally important part of our sentence. It's not an object. It's not receiving any type of action from a subject. It's just a nice intensive pronoun. Fine, I'll do it myself, she replied. And that's why I like this example, because I can hear the emphasis. I can hear almost the exclamation mark in this sentence. Fine, I'll do it myself, she replied. This is only there for emphasis. If I cross it off, the sentence will lose no meaning. Fine, I'll do it, she replied. I've lost zero meaning, only a little bit of emphasis. I know that was only there to intensify what was happening. So that was an intensive usage, not a reflexive usage. The team treated themselves to some frozen yogurt to celebrate their victory. I'm going to temporarily remove themselves from the sentence to test it. The team treated to some frozen yogurt to celebrate their victory. So I can quickly see that I have lost meaning. This is a reflexive part of our sentence. This is fundamentally important. The team are both subject and object. They are performing an action for themselves when they buy themselves some frozen yogurt. Indirect object. Direct object. She found herself penniless and friendless. I'm going to test this last one. Cross it off temporarily. She found penniless and friendless. I do think she was an object in our sentence, not just the subject. I don't think that was just there for emphasis. That is an object that's needed in this sentence for it to have the full meaning. So now we've seen just the 2 correct ways. There's only 2 ways that these self or selves words are used correctly. And I just did them both. They're either used intensively or they're used reflexively. That's the only way you can correctly use these words in English, these self or selves words. Well, now let's look at how they're misused so frequently by everyone. Here we go. Here's some pronoun abuse. This is pronoun abuse. Robert and myself went to the store. We don't need a self or a selves word here. We just need a nice subjective pronoun I. I know I'm in the subjective case because Robert and I would be doing the action. So we're subjects in our sentence. We would be doing the going. We're going to the store since we're performing the action. I don't need a self or a selves word. It wouldn't make any sense here. But you'll hear people say something like Robert and myself went to the store. It's incorrect. Just need a nice subjective form of this pronoun I. What happens when the pronoun is an object in the sentence? It needs to be in the objective form, not in the subjective form. So in this sentence, the principal is our subject. Every sentence in English has a subject. It's just the doer of the action. In this case, it's the principal. The principal gave Joseph, indirect object, and me, indirect object, a direct object warning. So the warning would be our direct object. The principal's giving out these direct objects to Joseph and me. We are indirect objects because we are receiving the direct object warning from the principal. So that's how this functions in English. Watch out for these self or selves words. I like testing them like this to determine is this reflexive? Is this intensive? What's really going on here? All right, let's turn to the next page. And now we have some short answer questions. Don't worry about rewriting the entire sentence. You probably just have to change a word or two. But this is everything we just covered. Pronoun and antecedent agreement. Pronouns can't change number. They can't change person. They can't mysteriously change gender mid-sentence. So we might test you on that. Prepositions. Some of these sentences may end on prepositions. You can't do that. And they may incorrectly utilize the object of the preposition. So remember that rule. So let's just take a look at the first one. So the sentence says, between you and I, Martin is not a very strong leader. So the word between is a preposition. I'm just going to highlight it. So I know that there's something called the object of the preposition, which means that everything in here in our prepositional phrase must be in the objective case, not the subjective case. So I know I is a subjective pronoun. So this is incorrect. We can't use a subjective pronoun I in our prepositional phrase due to the object of the preposition. It's actually going to be between you and me. So between you and me, Martin is not a very strong leader. You could even say between us. If I wanted to, I could say this, between us, because us is the objective form that I'm looking for. That's fine. Between us two, Martin is not a very strong leader. So however you want to do it, you just be aware that we wouldn't use the we form. The we form of this pronoun is the subjective form. You would never say, between we, Martin is not a very strong leader. And obviously, you're going to trust your ear on some of these, but there is a rule. We are going over this rule. Just the object of the preposition. So between you and me, or between us, Martin is not a very strong leader. That's just object of the preposition. Let's look at our second sentence, and this has a couple things incorrect with it. So this sentence says, who did you give the money to? So I know who the subject of this sentence, it would be this person. That's our subject. This would be the doer of the action. This is the giver of the money. But I know that this word to, that's a preposition. And I said that we should never end sentences on prepositions. We in fact can't in English because of this idea of pre. These things are supposed to go in front of other words to create prepositional phrases. That's their only function in English. So we are going to rewrite our sentence to not end on this preposition. And there's one other thing we have to fix. I'm just going to quickly look at my chart. I said that you are the subject. That means that this person would be an object. And I know the subjective form is who, but the objective form is whom. Who becomes whom? If I want the objective form, it's whom. The subjective form is who. So now I'm going to rewrite our entire sentence. Who becomes whom, and I must also not end on this prepositional phrase. I'm going to give it a try right here below. So here's my corrected sentence. To whom did you give the money? Question mark. All right, so it is a sentence. Who becomes whom? You is the doer of the action, and I'm not ending the sentence on the preposition. I moved the preposition way to the beginning. And that corrected our sentence. So who becomes whom? That's important. Remember the objective form of the subjective pronoun who is whom. You and me should have dinner together this week. So we would be doing the dining. You and me would be subjects of this sentence. We'd be performing the action. We would be doing the dining. But me is the objective form. So this is incorrect. I need the subjective form. And the subjective form of me is I. So here's the subjective form in our sentence. A doer of the action. You and I. That's an I. You and I should have dinner together this week. We would be doing the dining, so we are subjects. I regret to inform you, Kathy and myself will be unable to attend. So here I have one of those self words, but it's being used incorrectly. I don't need an intensive or a reflexive pronoun in this sentence. So Kathy and I need the subjective form of this pronoun because Kathy and, not me, Kathy and I would be doing the not attending, if that makes sense. We would be performing that action of not going. I guess even not attending something is an action. The absence of action is an action, I guess. I regret to inform you, Kathy and I will be unable to attend. So we would be doing the not attending. We are the subjective pronouns in that part of the sentence. Maggie convinced Jack and myself to join her for dinner. So we don't need a self or a selves word here. We don't need a reflexive or intensive pronoun. Maggie's doing the convincing, so I know she's the subject. That makes sense. Jack would be receiving convincing, so I know he's an object, and I would also be an object. And the objective form of I is me. Maggie convinced Jack and me to join her for dinner. So Maggie's doing the convincing. She is the subject. She is the doer of the action. Jack and me are receiving that convincing. So we are objects within that sentence. Including myself, there will be 4 of us at the game. We don't need a self or a selves word here. We don't need a reflexive or intensive pronoun. We would just say, including me, there will be 4 of us at the game. So watch out for those errors. Watch out for the object of the preposition. Make sure you understand the subject is the doer of the action in the sentence, and other things will be in an objective case if they're receiving some kind of action from that subject. All right, so here's our next topic. Watch out for pronoun ambiguity. Pronoun ambiguity is always incorrect on the SAT. This just occurs when the antecedent to which a pronoun refers is unclear. So I said earlier in the day, I said this is a sentence we could use. I could say, he is Bob. What happens if we get a he in our sentence and we can't figure out who the he is? What if we can never actually figure out that he is Bob? What if it can't just be a random person in our sentence? That would be incorrect. So we can't ever have pronoun ambiguity. We must always be able to figure out who or what the antecedent is. If we can't possibly figure it out, we have a problem. So watch out for pronoun ambiguity on the SAT. It may just be the case of having too many he's or she's in your sentence. It may be hard to clearly see what's going on in your sentence just because we have multiple people with the same gender. So here's a sentence that says they expressed their opinion when they elected him. Well, on the SAT, you may read a sentence like this, and you may never be able to figure out who he is, right? That would be a problem. If we can never figure out who this elected official is, we can never figure out an antecedent, that's a problem in English. We must always know who the antecedent is somewhere. It must be somewhere within that passage or paper or essay or whatever. If you can't figure out who the antecedent is, you have a problem, because that's a basic rule in English. You must always be able to determine who or what the antecedent is. And that's just that to which the pronoun refers. So let's take a look at another example. This one will arise because we have multiple he's in our sentence. For his birthday, Frank gave Dave tickets to see his favorite band. Who likes this band? It's actually difficult to tell because we have multiple he's in our sentence. So let's restructure the sentence so it's more clear. For his birthday, Frank gave Dave tickets to see Dave's favorite band. So now I've indicated who actually likes this band, and the sentence makes more sense now that I've eliminated this pronoun ambiguity. So here we have some ambiguous sentences. I'm going to read the first one, and we'll discuss why it is ambiguous. So here's the sentence as written. When Kate and Kathleen spoke, she explained she could not come to the party. So can I really even determine what's going on in the sentence? Not really. Perhaps Kathleen is busy and she can't make it to Kate's party, unfortunately. That's possible. Or perhaps Kate really dislikes Kathleen and Kate is throwing a party to which Kathleen is expressly uninvited. It's possible, right? So we could fix this. We could say something such as, when Kate and Kathleen spoke, let's use the antecedents. That'll help eliminate this ambiguity. I think most of the problem is we have multiple she's in this sentence. So if I say, when Kate and Kathleen spoke, Kate explained let's say Kate explained that Kathleen okay, I'm gonna finish the sentence. When Kate and Kathleen spoke, Kate explained, I'm putting this here, sorry, I'm just trying to indicate that where that used to be, this whole part here. Okay, so this part goes here. Okay, when Kate and Kathleen spoke, Kate explained that Kathleen could not come to the party. That's possible. Kathleen's not permitted to come to the party, maybe. She's forbidden, perhaps, from coming to the party. It's hard to tell meaning from the initial sentence, so let's just go with that one. It's equally hard with this sentence. Jake explained to his father he was nervous about doing his own taxes. This could mean a couple of things, because I have multiple he's in this sentence. So perhaps this is Jake's first job, and he's nervous about doing his own taxes. That would make sense. Jake explained to his father he was nervous about doing his own taxes. Or perhaps Jake's a CPA. Jake prepares his father's taxes every year, but Jake's father decided to purchase a large pleasure yacht and write it off as a business expense, and this makes Jake nervous. Jake is going to lose his CPA license, maybe. So in order to create that sentence, we would say something like this. Jake explained to his father he was nervous about doing his father's taxes. Indefinite pronouns are used to refer to things or people that are unspecified. So sometimes I need to refer to everything in the universe, all matter, everything, or everybody, everybody in the room, everybody in the audience. It sounds like many people. Sometimes I have to refer to nothing, the nothingness. Maybe I'm reading some kind of existential poetry or something. I don't know. Sometimes we want to refer to nothingness. Yeah. Any of these pronouns in this first box, they're always singular. This is strange. This is not intuitive. How can everybody, it sounds like many people, how can everyone be singular? These are all singular as they are used in a sentence. They always take singular verb forms. If you use a pronoun to refer back to any of these singular indefinite pronouns, it will have to be a singular pronoun because these are all singular. So I understand why nothing is singular. Nothing makes sense that is singular to me because 0 factorial is 1. The number of ways we could have nothing would be precisely 1. If nothingness were to exist, we would have one instance of nothingness, if that makes sense. Here's your nothing. It's right here. There's only one possible way we could possibly have nothingness. So it makes sense to me that nothing would be singular. I don't understand why everyone or everybody would be singular. How can everyone in this room be singular? They are. Or everything. How can all matter in the universe be singular? I would think that everything would have to be plural, but it's always singular. It always takes singular verb forms. Anything in this box takes singular verb forms. Don't worry about the ones that are always plural. You won't mess these up. And don't worry about these ones that are sometimes singular and sometimes plural. You'll never mess these ones up. These are the tricky ones because it doesn't make much sense that everyone would be singular, but they are. They're always singular in that sentence. They always take singular verb forms. As we do these, I will try to illustrate which these pronouns are singular, right? So let's take a look at these. Let's look at our first example. Everyone. Everyone's singular. It has to be singular because of this rule. Everyone's singular will read at an advanced level when they have completed this course. So how can I use a plural pronoun they to refer back to something that is singular? And the answer is you can't. This sentence is incorrect, so let's correct it. Let's use singular pronouns to refer back to something that is singular. Everyone will read at an advanced level when he or she has completed this course. Everyone, singular, will read at an advanced level when he or she, singular, has completed this course. So I can't use have. I can't use a plural form of this verb with something that is singular. Singular things take singular verbs. Neither the cat on the sofa nor the dog under the table seem to notice me. So here I have two prepositional phrases, and I have two singular entities joined with the correlative conjunction nor. So I know cat is singular. I know dog is singular. So I have two singular entities joined with this conjunction nor. So I know my entire compound subject, even though it's a compound subject, it will be singular. My subject is singular. Neither the cat nor the dog seems to notice me. I have to use singular verb forms with singular subjects. So neither the cat on the sofa nor the dog under the table seems to notice me. You would say they seem to notice me if your subject is plural, but it's not here. It'd be similar to it seems to be a nice day today. Singular things take singular verbs. It seems to be the case. And here's our trickiest one. If any one singular indefinite pronoun comes to the front door and they ask for me, then tell them I'm not here. So they is a plural pronoun and them are plural pronouns. Can I use plural pronouns to refer back to something that is singular? Never. Not correctly in English anyway. So I need singular pronouns to refer back to my singular indefinite pronoun. So let's pick some singular pronouns that would work. I don't need a they here. Do I know the gender of anyone? Of course not. So I have to use both. It's nice to use both when you don't know the gender. If anyone comes to the front door and he or she, singular subjects take singular verb forms, asks for me, not ask. If anyone comes to the front door and he or she asks for me, then tell, not plural, anyone can't be plural, it has to be singular. I have to use a singular pronoun to refer back to something that is singular. And now in the second half of the sentence, it would be an implied you that is the subject. You would be doing the action for the second half of the sentence, which is a little different than the first part of the sentence. But in the second half of the sentence, you, an implied you, would be doing the telling. So you are the subject in the sentence, the second half of the sentence. Then you tell him or her, I'm not here. All right, so there's our completed sentence. That would just go right there. I'm going to read the corrected version. If anyone singular comes to the front door and he or she singular asks for me, singular verb form, then you, an implied you, tell him or her, now they're objects in my sentence. Now they would be receiving the telling. Him or her, I'm not here. So watch out for pronoun agreement. They can make it tricky. They can use singular indefinite pronouns. It's not going to be something as simple as he is Bob. That was just to get started. They can make this complicated. So watch out for singular indefinite pronouns. That's the box right there. Relative pronouns. So relative pronouns, the relative pronouns are that, which, who, whose, and whom. So these are the relative pronouns, that, which, who, whose, and whom. And relative pronouns mark the beginning of relative clauses. There are two types of relative clauses that we're interested in, restrictive and non-restrictive clauses, and there's a little bit of a difference between them. Let's just take a look at our examples, and then we'll talk about why they're different. Really, the odd thing is, most of this is just a comma rule. So we're going through some pretty advanced English topics. This is just a glorified comma rule, sort of. So let's take a look at these two examples, and we'll see why the second one is commas and why the first one must never have commas. All right, so here's our two sentences. Factories that emit greenhouse gases must be better regulated. Volleyball, which is a popular sport, involves two teams, a ball, and a net. So this first sentence is a restrictive clause sentence. And our second sentence is a non-restrictive clause sentence. So what do I mean by that? We've restricted the referent factories in this case with our clause. So this clause here has restricted our referent factories. And I can determine if it's restricted our referent factories by temporarily removing it. We're going to do that temporarily remove the clause thing again. Just temporarily remove the clause. And let's determine if we've lost any meaning. Just going to cross this out for a minute. I'm going to repeat my sentence. Factories must be better regulated. I think we have lost meaning. Were we talking about all factories? Nope. We were talking about only the bad apples, so I have lost meaning. This is a restrictive clause. I have restricted the referent factories. So there would be no commas here. I can't have them. Now let's look at our second example. I'm going to read it the same way. Our second sample sentence is a non-restrictive clause sentence. Volleyball, which is a popular sport, involves two teams, a ball, and a net. So I'm going to highlight volleyball. That's our referent. Have I restricted volleyball in any way? I'm just going to eliminate the clause temporarily, just like we did last time. I'm just going to determine, have we lost any meaning at all? Volleyball involves two teams, a ball and a net. We've lost zero meaning here. So I know that is a non-restrictive clause. We haven't restricted the referent volleyball. We're merely just describing what it is. We're explaining what it is. We haven't restricted it in any way. So we do need the commas. You must have these commas to offset our clause. I like to think of it as those little commas. I like to think of those little commas as scoopers. And if you could scoop out that clause and the sentence still makes sense, then you needed the scoopers. You needed the commas. That's a quick test. Someone explained that to me in high school, and that was enough to get me well through college before I majored in English, obviously. And they explained this to me. But before I went to college, I didn't even know this rule. Someone just explained to me, well, if you could scoop it out, you probably needed the commas because that's a non-restrictive clause. Well, now I know it's a non-restrictive clause. So there are a couple more rules. There are rules about these pronouns. Can I use that? Can I use which? There are rules for which ones must be used depending on whether you have a restrictive clause or not. So that's the general idea. Can I make a restrictive clause sentence about volleyball? Sure, I'm going to try. So here's a restrictive clause sentence about volleyball. Volleyball, no comma, that is played at an Olympic level, no comma, involves volleyball speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. I'm not actually sure if that's true, but that would be my sentence. I would not offset that relative clause with commas because I have restricted the referent volleyball. I'm no longer talking about all volleyball. I'm talking about a very specific type of elite volleyball. Let's try to remove the clause and see if that sentence has lost meaning. I think it has. Here's my sentence. Volleyball involves volleyball speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. I don't think that sentence is true. The volleyball you played in high school, I don't think so. So I had restricted the referent volleyball in my previous sentence, so that was a restrictive clause. So that example must not contain commas. It's really just a glorified comma rule. A lot of this just comes down to the comma rule and which pronouns can you use. There are rules about which ones of these we can use depending on the situation. So let's scroll down a little bit here. Here's the part where I mentioned the scoopers. If you can scoop out the clause without fundamentally changing the sentence, then you probably needed those commas. Just pretend they're little scoopers. You could scoop out the clause, then you needed your scoopers. You needed your comma scoopers in that case. So we just have a couple more rules here about which relative pronoun you must use depending on the situation. Who can only be used with people. Which refers to things. And that, the relative pronoun that, refers to either people or things. We already know the objective form of who is whom. Who becomes whom in the objective form. We've seen that already. The relative pronoun that is only used with restrictive clauses and never takes a comma. That's really important. I'm going to highlight this. You should underline this on your packet. The relative pronoun that is only used with restrictive clauses, and you should never see a comma in front of it in a relative clause. It just doesn't take a comma. The relative pronouns who and which can be used in either case and may or may not require commas depending on whether it's a restrictive or non-restrictive clause. So let's go down to these sentences. We're just going to correct some sentences. We're getting to the end of this packet here. I'm going to read the first sentence. Pandas, which are bears native to South Central China, are endangered but increasing in number. Remember that this is just a glorified comma rule. I'm going to temporarily cross out the clause to determine if we need commas. Pandas are endangered but increasing in number. Has the sentence lost any meaning? Have we lost meaning by removing that clause? We haven't lost meaning. We were really just describing these bears. We weren't restricting the referent pandas. We were just explaining what they are. So because of that, I needed the commas. Pandas, comma, which are bears native to South Central China, comma, is really just a comma rule, are endangered but increasing in number. Just remember, temporarily take out the clause. Try to determine if you restricted the referent. If you could scoop out that clause and the sentence still makes sense. If you've lost zero meaning, then you needed your comma scoopers. There are 4 non-restrictive clauses. That's what the commas are for. Men, at least one comma, maybe both commas. Men who have beards may find their faces become itchy. So I said this is mainly a comma rule. Here I have a comma and here I have a comma. So let's determine if I need these commas. I'm going to temporarily cross out my relative clause. Let's see if we've lost any meaning. Men may find their faces become itchy. Why? I think we have lost meaning. I didn't know we were talking about the bearded men. I have restricted the referent men. I'm no longer talking about all men. I am talking about a specific subset of men. So I have restricted the referent men. This is a restrictive clause. And we know restrictive clauses do not have commas to offset them. So men, no comma, who have beards, no comma, may find their faces become itchy. This is really just a comma rule. I can use who with people, so everything is fine there. Men who have beards may find their faces become itchy. Let's take a look at this next example. Dough that takes some time to rise must be allowed to sit before it is baked. So here's our sentence. I'm going to temporarily remove the clause, and let's see if we've lost meaning. It's just the same way we've been doing all of these. Dough must be allowed to sit before it is baked. All dough? Why? What if I'm making a flatbread? Must all dough rest before and rise before it is baked? Of course not. I've restricted the referent dough. I am talking about a specific subset of dough. I am only talking about leavened breads, leavened dough with yeast in it. So I can't have these commas. I have restricted the referent dough. So no commas. It's just a scooper rule. If I can't scoop this out, that means we can't have the commas. Dough that takes some time to rise must be allowed to sit before it is baked. This is really just a comma rule, mainly. It's a comma rule, but you also have to know, okay, which pronouns can I use? Can I use that in this sentence? Can I use who in this sentence? Can I use which in this sentence? Be aware that who becomes whom in certain situations in the objective case. All right, so here at the end we have our writing passage for today, and this is on everything we went over today. So we're going to read about the mobile application developers to the left as we answer these 10 questions to the right. This is on every topic we covered today. This is on pronoun, antecedent agreement. This is on restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. You may see some of those self or selves words. Maybe this is everything we went over today. It's very pronoun heavy. Most of these questions are about pronouns. I could tell just from looking here, all these pronouns. Here's our pronouns. So the pronouns are all over the SAT, so you just have to be familiar with them. They just take the place of nouns. So try these 10. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do these 10. I'm going to give you some time to do that, and then we'll go over that. That's the final thing we'll do today. So take a few minutes. Think about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less than that. Do these 10. And I'll quickly go over them, and then I will sign us off for the day because that's all we have left to do. Okay, I'm going to start going over these questions. If you need more time, you can just pause the video before going through them. But let's look at the first one here. I'll read the sentence as written, and then we can decide if we want to change it. So, as written, the sentence says, mobile application developers create the apps that enhance our smartphones and tablets. So here I have the word that introduces a relative clause. I'm talking about the apps that enhance our smartphones and tablets. Have we restricted this word apps, applications? I think we have. We're only talking about the mobile ones. So because we're only talking about the mobile applications, we have restricted the referent applications, apps. This word is just short for the word applications. We have restricted the referent. We're only talking about the apps that are mobile, so there would be no comma because this is a restrictive clause. And I said that with the restrictive clause, you should not see a comma in front of your restrictive clause, and you definitely should not see a comma in front of the relative pronoun that in a restrictive clause. That's a no-no. So this one is just answer choice C. No comma. I have restricted applications. I'm only talking about the mobile ones. I'm not talking about the desktop applications. So because I have restricted the referent apps, there would be no comma. Number 2 says, mobile games help pass the time while social media connects yourself to friends and family even on the go. So I don't need a self or a selves word here, one of those pronouns that we talked about, the intensive and reflexive pronouns. We don't need either of those, and I can infer that if I use the pronoun us, I can understand that we'd be talking about you and me. We talk about us, and that would make sense. I'm going to try it in this sentence. Mobile games help pass the time while social media connects us to friends and family even on the go. So watch out for those intensive and reflexive pronouns. You don't always need a reflexive intensive pronoun. Sometimes you just need a regular pronoun. Number 3, for we who find a fair amount of the day glued to our telephone screens, it can be easy to overlook the amount of work that goes into creating the applications that empower our smartphones and tablets. So let's look at the first part of the sentence. For is a preposition. So because of the object of the preposition, we becomes us. For us, objective case. For us who find a fair amount of the day glued to our telephone screens, it can be easy to overlook the amount of work that goes into creating the applications, no comma, that empower our smartphones and tablets. This is very similar to the first question. I have restricted the referent applications. I am only talking about the mobile applications, not all applications, not the desktop and the mobile applications. So because I have restricted the referent applications, we have a restrictive clause, and I know that restrictive clauses are not offset with commas. They don't take commas. So 4 is B. That's very similar to our first question, where we're only talking about the mobile apps. Here we're only talking about the mobile apps again. Number 5, I'll read the sentence as written. Mobile application developers usually have bachelor's degrees and possibly graduate degrees in computer science or a related field. But with the rise of tech entrepreneurship, one might not always. So I know they're testing me on pronouns. They've highlighted this third person pronoun one, which is singular. One is singular. A would be singular. Hopefully you can see that. One. A third person one. Can I use a singular pronoun to refer back to a plural antecedent? Can I use one to refer back to many developers? Nope. What can I use? I can use something that's plural. I could use a plural they to refer back to a plural developers. So it wouldn't be one, it would be they. Let me read the corrected sentence. Mobile application developers usually have bachelor's degrees and possibly graduate degrees in computer science or a related field, but with the rise of tech entrepreneurship, they might not always. So they can refer back to the many developers. That would make sense. Let's look at 6. The dawn of the mobile era in some respects recollects the excitement of the first PCs and their groundbreaking applications. So can I use a plural possessive pronoun to give possession to many personal computers? Sure. That's perfectly legal. So everything's fine. I can use a plural pronoun to refer back to plural computers. That does make sense. These are plural. So I can use this antecedent to refer back to the PCs. That's perfectly fine. Let's look at 7. Mobile application developers propose and publish his or her singular applications. So can I use singular pronouns to refer back to plural many developers? Of course not. So this, of course, can't be singular. They publish their plural applications. This is a plural possessive pronoun that shows ownership. Mobile application developers propose and publish their applications on stores established by the device makers and share in revenue based on the selling prices. Let's look at 8. It is clear to see the mobile revolution has fundamentally altered how we interface with them. Interface with whom? Who are they? Who is this mysterious them at the end of our sentence? So I believe we have an ambiguous pronoun. I don't know who they could be. I'm not sure. A's out. We can interface with others. We can interface with computing. I'm going to read computing in the sentence. It is clear to see the mobile revolution has fundamentally altered how we interface with computing. So we can interface with computing. We can't interface with ourselves, and one cannot interface with oneself. I don't believe. That's getting very metaphysical. I don't believe that we have that capacity. Here's number 9. Mobile application ideas can range from solving vexing problems to transportation to gaming to contacting ourselves. Can we contact ourselves? I don't think so. That sounds, again, very metaphysical. I think we can contact others, or even to the uninhibited realms of the imagination. And here's our final sentence. I'm going to read it as written. Testers who may be required to ensure that everything functions appropriately in any applicable scenario. That's a fragment. What I just read is a fragment. A is out. How can I fix my fragment? I just have to delete this word. Now I have a sentence. Testers may be required to ensure that everything functions appropriately in any applicable scenario. So that's our second grammar lesson today. Very pronoun heavy, but pronouns are all over the SAT. That's all we have for you today for this lesson. So, of course, we'll see you all next time for our next lesson. Please take practice test 7 when you get a chance. I believe it's on page 692, but let me just confirm that. It is practice test number 7 in your blue book. I know the practice tests in kind of a strange order. I understand the college board can't count or whatever, but they're in a weird order. Practice test 7 is on, it is on page 692. So please, if you get a chance, take the practice test on page 692. It is practice test 7. Please mail it to Mrs. Hessler. And her website is just on our address, heatonprep.com, if you need the website, if you need her home address to mail tests, for mailing your testing. That's all I have for today, so I will sign us all off. Margot had to leave, but if you're watching this later at home, that's great. And we'll see you all for next time. Please take practice test 7 if you get a chance. The actual SAT is nigh. It's just a few weeks away. So if you get a chance, all the practice will really help you. You'll get a great score. Trust me, it's worth the practice. So I'm going to sign us off. That's all I have for us today. So we'll see you all next time.